Hi everyone, and welcome to another one of our virtual Yellowstone tours. I'm sitting at the Gardiner School. Gardiner is a small town right on the Yellowstone River, just outside Yellowstone's north entrance. And yes, those are elk that you see at the Gardiner School. Today we're going to be doing the section of road between Yellowstone's north entrance and Mammoth Hot Springs, which is the park's headquarters. You can see the route map at yellowstonetours.net/map. And if we have a look over there, behind the school's sporting fields, we can see the Roosevelt Arch. And I'll be telling you more about that. One of the beauties of being in the Yellowstone ecosystem is that you never know what animals you're going to see where. As you might imagine, the nickname of this school is the Bruins because of the number of bears that we do get here at Yellowstone National Park. Up ahead of us then is the Roosevelt Arch. The Roosevelt Arch was so called because it was dedicated by President Theodore Roosevelt in 1903. The interesting thing is that President Roosevelt never actually came back to Yellowstone to see the finished arch. You can see it says at the top there, for the benefit and enjoyment of the people. President Roosevelt never actually came back to Yellowstone to see the finished arch. The reason this arch was created was probably because of Hiram Chittenden. And those of you who are regular viewers of these virtual Yellowstone tours might recognize the name. You have the Chittenden Bridge that goes over the Yellowstone River just before Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, so you can get across to the other side of the river to the South Rim Drive. And then you have Chittenden Road, which is the road that you can take up at the top of Mount Washburn to go for a hike even further up towards the top of the mountain. Ahead of us is the north entrance to Yellowstone, and we can see these beautiful open fields, and you'll come here in the evenings and there's often times where you have a greater chance of seeing wildlife in this area that is outside the park than inside the park, with herds of pronghorn and elk and occasionally deer as well. I'm going to stop filming now until we are inside Yellowstone, and I will continue once I'm inside the park. Hi again, I've just gone through the north entrance of Yellowstone National Park and am now making my way up the short drive towards Mammoth Hot Springs. I had been telling you about the herds of animals that you may see outside the park. We're at one of the lower parts of Yellowstone. The elevation here, according to a sign that is ahead of us on the other side of the road, is 5,316 feet. And with this being one of the lower parts of Yellowstone, this is where the buffalo will often migrate to in the winters because it gets so cold at the higher elevations, not to say that it doesn't get cold down here. And that causes all sorts of problems, not only for the buffalo, but for the people and politicians and ranchers and farmers of the state of Montana. And I'll go into that in a lot more detail in another one of our virtual Yellowstone tour series. But very briefly, buffalo are one of the species in the park that carry a disease called brucellosis. And there is a concern amongst the authorities and ranchers in Montana that if a domestic cow or bull comes into contact with a buffalo that is carrying brucellosis, and it has to happen in a certain way, then the disease could spread with very harmful effects towards the domestic cattle industry in Montana. There's a lot more to that story, and I'm not going to go into it today. Just look for it in one of our other virtual Yellowstone tours. As we start climbing up towards Mammoth Hot Springs, we see these cliffs on the other side of the Gardiner River, and this is one of the places in the park where, if you're lucky, you may see bighorn sheep. Bighorn sheep are native to what's known as the Yellowstone Northern Range, the higher parts of Yellowstone up in the north of the park. And you will, if you're lucky enough to see them, find them in the most inhospitable places. And the reason they're in those inhospitable places is because it is very difficult for predators to get down and attack them when they're on rock faces or sheer cliff faces. I mentioned in another one of these virtual Yellowstone tours that I was at a certain point of Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone one day and saw a female bighorn sheep that had just given birth to a baby right down a sheer rock face. How it got down there, I will never know, and how the little baby was going to get back up is something else that is a bit of a mystery. You can see the Gardiner River flowing over some rapids. The park headquarters is at Mammoth Hot Springs, where we're headed. What happened was, in 1872, when Yellowstone was established, it became not only the first national park in America, but also the first national park in the world. And the authorities didn't really have a lot of ideas about how they were going to control things inside Yellowstone. Now, I will get back to that in a minute. We can see a sign there, more or less, behind those people that says 45th parallel. And the 45th parallel is halfway between the equator and the North Pole. And the amusing thing about that sign marking where the 45th parallel is that it's actually in the wrong place. It's 1.5 miles approximately too far north. The sign used to be just about where the parking lot for the Boiling River is, and I'll tell you about that shortly. And there was too much traffic congestion there. So the authorities decided that they were going to move the sign to where it is now, and you can see more or less where, just around that next corner, is where the parking lot to the Boiling River is, and that is where it actually is. So you can have a photograph at two places if you avoid the traffic. One where the sign is, and the other where the actual 45th parallel is. The reason they have that sign there warning you to be careful is that people like to come and swim in that river with the Boiling River being closed. I see there's a sign there that says Boiling River closed. Anyway, the Boiling River is upstream on the Gardiner River. This is the parking lot over here, and there is generally a ranger station there to stop people heading up to the Boiling River. And what the Boiling River is, it's a place where the remnants of a hot spring from Mammoth Hot Springs comes out at the Gardiner River. And what's really interesting, I don't know if you can quite see the trail over there. That's the trail that leads you to where the Boiling River is. But what's interesting is that you can stand with 1 foot in the river at, say, 35, 36 degrees in the spring, and that's 35, 36 degrees Fahrenheit. And the other foot in the in the hot spring itself, it's say 85 or 90 degrees. You can sit and soak in the Boiling River once most of the fast running water from the spring snow runoff has taken place. But there are signs there. One sign cautions you that you're not allowed to go into the river or be in that area without your clothes on, and that's no doubt for the benefit of our European guests, as I've mentioned in another one of these videos. But the other sign is more serious, and it says that caution, you can die here. And the reason is that many of these thermal features give off noxious gases, and if you're sitting in the river with your head just above the water level, that could be where the gases are coming to the surface, and you run the risk of being exposed to them. Although, to the best of my knowledge, there hasn't been a death here from that for over 100 years. You can see that we're starting to climb uphill. To the right is the campground at Mammoth Hot Springs, and we're going to be coming across buildings, newer buildings, where staff, National Park Service staff who work at Mammoth stay. That'll be just around the next corner. I started telling you though about how the park headquarters at Mammoth Hot Springs came into existence. I mentioned that Yellowstone was the world's first national park. It was founded, and there are some of the lodging buildings, the newer ones. Yellowstone was founded in 1872, and what happened was that you would have a lot of poachers here, a lot of unruly, lawless elements. You'd have people setting up tent camps wherever they wanted amongst the hot springs and the geysers. You'd have people chipping off some of the rock and thermal features around the geysers and the hot springs, and no one was in a position to control it, because you didn't have the National Park Service in existence the way that it is today. And eventually the authorities decided in 1886 to send the army here, and they sent the US cavalry from Fort Custer in Montana. When we were at the small town of Gardiner at the start of this video, we were in Montana. We have since crossed into the state of Wyoming. About 97% of Yellowstone is in Wyoming, 2% in Montana, and 1% in Idaho. But the authorities sent the cavalry in to establish order, and that's what happened. And they were here for 32 years, originally under the leadership of a Captain Moses Harris. As the speed limit drops, we can see that we are now coming into the Mammoth Hot Springs area, and this is where the army was based. And so many of these buildings, not that one ahead of us, but so many of these buildings are the buildings that the army people used to stay in. You can see some of the older ones over there. This is the Yellowstone Justice Center. There is a federal magistrate's court here, and if you transgress or are charged with a crime, you'll be brought here. There's an elk herd that always hangs out in Yellowstone. I'm just going to pull in here for a minute, because if you look very carefully, and I'm going to try and zoom in, can you see that little baby elk to the left of the cow? There's two cows there, but to our left of the cow on the left, that elk is really not more than perhaps a month old. Now these buildings here that we see are the newer buildings at Yellowstone. They aren't some of the great classic buildings. I'm just trying to back out. They're not some of the classic buildings that the US Army used to stay in, but I'll show you some of those in a moment when I'm safely back on the road. That over there is the post office, and look how cool that is. Can you see that those bear that are protecting the post office are wearing masks? This is 2020, the year that coronavirus broke out in the US, and it's nice to see that the post office has got a sense of humor, and that the bear are wearing masks. Now there is, as you've gathered, an elk herd that always hangs out at Mammoth. I have never been to Mammoth Hot Springs and not seen this elk herd. We haven't seen any bulls today so far, but most of the time you do. That's the Mammoth Hot Springs Hotel. That is the visitor center, and I'm just going to take a drive down here just for a short while so you can see some of the historic buildings to which I was referring. That there is the old parade ground, and those are the terraces at Mammoth Hot Springs. You see these beautiful old buildings that where the administration used to take place and where the officers and some of the troops used to live. You need to stay away from the elk. They don't look like they could do you any damage, the female ones, the cows. But what they tend to do is get up on their back feet and use their front feet as baseball bats. And it's quite a scary sight when they try and strike people. So those again are the terraces. You can see most of those are dead terraces, and I talk more about that in various of our other virtual Yellowstone tours. This road over here, if we were to turn left, we'll go down to the Tower Roosevelt area and eventually to the northeast entrance of Yellowstone. And there's another elk grazing away. Just passing the hotel on the right, the Terrace Grill coming up on the right, then the general store, the gas station, and once again the parade ground. Thank you for joining me on this virtual Yellowstone tour. If you enjoy our virtual Yellowstone tour series, please consider giving us a thumbs up and subscribing to our channel. Otherwise, see you in Yellowstone.